I got into it for so long, where a lot of people, they can go maybe 1 or 2 years in deployments, and I was there for over 8 years combined between Iraq and Afghanistan. That was my life. That became my life. Being here at home was my surreal life, because I just felt nobody could understand that. Nobody was going to understand that. And how do I begin to explain that to somebody that's never going to really fully understand what it is I'm trying to express or what experiences I had?
What is up, family? Welcome to the XPerience podcast. If you haven't already, make sure you like, subscribe, and share the content. We are still trying to reach our giveaway marks. 150 subscribers, 200 subscribers, and 250 subscribers. Obviously, the 150, you will go ahead and get the honor of having some swell merch. So make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Make sure that you are public so I can be able to see you, so I can enter you into this raffle. But we're getting very close to that mark. We want to thank everybody that's been supporting this. And without further ado, we have a very interesting episode. Me personally, growing up, being a military kid, my dad being serving in the Army, I felt the need and necessary to bring on this gentleman who served in our country, attends our church, and works in security at our church. So everybody, please give it up for Mr. Jason Fortik. How are you doing, my guy?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing swell, man. We're in a place of swellness, of excellence, and we're believing that God's about to move in mighty ways.
Amen.
And obviously have the opportunity to share a little bit about your service. Obviously, I want to thank you for your service to our country, first and foremost. I believe everybody should have the opportunity to see the military as an honor, as a service, and as something that is positive. Especially growing up with a dad who served in the military, I felt like it was necessary to bring this community around to the importance of not only service in church, but also service for a country. And so thank you first and foremost for your service. Tell me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, obviously the decision to go to the military,
right, and
where you're at today.
Yeah. So born and raised Sacramento, South Sacramento.
Oh, wow.
Grew up in the Elk Grove Unified School District. Went to Rudder when I was in junior.
You went to Rudder?
Rudder.
Rudder. That's what I'm talking about. Any road runners out there, make sure you like out there. I went to Rudder too.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Went in Florin High School, which is actually pretty funny because I ended up substituting there today as a substitute teacher. But went to Florin High School, got in a little bit of trouble when I was younger. Unfortunately, they told me I had to leave, and went to Calvine High School and got in a little bit of trouble there too. So I wasn't really a good kid when I was younger, and started working. 9/11 happened, and that's when I decided to join the military.
So 9/11 happened, and that's when you decided. What went into that decision for you? Why 9/11? What triggered you when it came to 9/11 for you want to go to serve?
Well, like you said earlier, my family has served in the military as well. My grandfather all the way to my dad. And the part of being patriotic and still putting that in our family, on top of seeing how impactful the terrorist attacks were to our country. I didn't think it was going to really hit me that hard. But once I seen the devastation and how it impacted our country, but also how our country came together, that's what inspired me to serve our country.
That's an amazing testimony right there. I kind of got chills talking about it because I think everybody that had the opportunity to remember that remembers where they were.
Yeah, 100%.
So where were you when you saw the attacks happen?
So I was actually working construction. I was a journeyman plumber. I was doing construction plumbing. So it was back when the big housing boom, back in the early 2000s. So I had my hands on basically every housing development in the Sacramento area. And that morning, I was working at one of the job sites off of Elk Grove, Florin.
Okay.
And first thing, sun was just barely coming up for us, because it happened on the East Coast, and so we have that 3-hour time difference. So the sun was still just barely coming up for us. And my buddy pulled up and started yelling at us saying, "Hey, did you guys hear what happened?" And obviously, no, because we're busy working. And so we stopped what we were doing. One of the things he said was a plane hit one of the Twin Towers. And I remember I looked at my buddy And I said, this is going to be a long day. This isn't the last attack we're going to have.
Yeah.
And sure enough, throughout that day, everything else unfolded. And that's when we found out everything that happened on 9/11.
That's crazy. I remember I was in the 4th grade, and I just see, at the time, my stepmom just crying as she's watching this plane hit this tower.
Right.
And I'm a kid. I have no idea what's going on until, you're a kid. You don't talk about this stuff. Our 4th grade teacher sat us down and for a whole 50 minutes just spent the whole period talking about the attack.
Right.
And I'm like, wow, this is really serious.
Yeah.
And what's crazy is that attack, I've never seen so much unity happen on September 12th in my life.
Correct.
Like football games.
Yeah.
Any kind of sports, politicians, and even at my school, all of us are wearing red, white, and blue.
Yeah.
We're singing, we're proud to be an American. It was really an attack against America. A lot of people we even consider against the democracy that we have.
Yeah.
It was such a major event during that time, and ultimately it sparked a war that would eventually happen. So in regards to military, what branch were you in, and as far as any titles that you carried while you were there?
So I enlisted in the Army and went in for reconnaissance. And with that, I was able to be designated what we call the LRMs, or the Designated Defense Marksman, which is a sniper. And pretty much my whole time in the military, I was able to reach the rank of Staff Sergeant. And with the time of war, I was fast tracking, so I was kind of breaking a little bit of records when it comes to getting promoted. I ended up getting promoted to Staff Sergeant, which is an E6 grade, in less than 4 years. Okay. And peacetime, and part of the peacetime, a lot of guys would spend 20 years in the service and just reach that rank of an E6, to where I was fast tracking and got it in less than 4 years.
Wow. Was it common for people to elevate that quickly, especially during a time of war?
Well, for my job specifically, being in combat arms, unfortunately, we're the ones that are fighting the wars. I say less than 10% of the actual military is a fighting force, where the rest of it is support. And a lot of people don't understand that. A lot of people think you go into the military, you're going to go fight a war, when there's so much more that has to support the people that are actually fighting. So not even 10% of what consists of the military are actually fighting forces.
Okay, and you were in that 10%.
Correct, yes.
And you were on the front lines, and obviously you're a marksman.
Yep.
So you're, in a way, you're in the front lines, but at the same time, you're used as a base of strategy to go out and attack the enemy, in a way, would you say?
Yeah, well, one of the things is with the war on terrorism, the way we fight evolves. With the terrorist attacks, you got to think we were just coming out of Desert Storm, and before that, we were just coming out of Vietnam. So a lot of our base training was more jungle warfare, and it wasn't really urban environment, to where we were fighting guerrilla warfare. Asymmetrical warfare is what we call it, because now we're fighting wars in an urban environment instead of being out in the open, let's say either in the jungle or somewhere out in the desert, where you're literally fighting force on force.
Yeah.
So our training and our tactics evolved with how much time we spent fighting the war on terrorism. So we were basically learning how to fight as we went along with that.
So it went from obviously guerrilla warfare to more tactical, where everything was more tactical in regards to attacks.
More urban environment, clearing buildings. That was one of the primary jobs I had when I was in the Army. I was an Alpha Entry Team leader. So I was the one that was in charge of the teams that would go and hit houses. When hitting houses is raiding houses. So if we have a mission where we have intel where we need to take over an Al-Qaeda compound, and Al-Qaeda compounds, it could be like 7 buildings.
Yeah.
And so my job was to take my team, Alpha team, and then Bravo team, and we would go and either capture as many as we can or take them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think, that's a little bit of a testimony, obviously, from going from Vietnam to go into Iraq and how it's evolved today, because obviously we see the wars that are going on today, and I would say it's even more tactical than it was before. So in regards to wars specifically, right after 9/11, so you were involved in the war in Iraq. How long were you there for? And then share some of the experiences that maybe you have or any specific battles that you remember.
Yeah. So my first deployment, I ended up going in 2004, and I was involved with one of the biggest battles during the Iraq War, which was the Operation Phantom Fury, which was a battle of Fallujah. So my first deployment, that was probably one of the biggest deals that I had. Of course, for me, I ended up, my second deployment, I spent 15 months in Iraq. Okay. So a total being just in Iraq in itself, in that country and fighting that war, I was just a little over 2 years, almost 2.5 years I was in Iraq. Oh, wow. And for the first deployment, my unit, we were there for every major campaign during the Iraq War. So I was there for Operation Phantom Fury. I was there for the very first elections that they had in the history of Iraq after we got rid of the regime, and then came home and not even a year later redeployed back to Iraq during the surge and was there for 15 months. And that was one of the other major campaigns was the surge during the Iraq War.
As far as wars of significance or battles of significance, which one would you say was the more significant battle that you were part of?
Well, Phantom Fury will always go down in history, and that was more predominantly a Marine operation. Okay. But we were tasked out to support the Marines at the same time, and since we were in Baghdad, we got shifted over to Fallujah because they were going to need the assets to get there to clear out the enemy at the same time. I would say, in a sense, it's almost not to say, war is war. Yeah. So there's really not one battle that was worse than the other. But I would say in a difference as far as maturity and how I viewed the wars with my experiences would be a lot different, especially my first time. I was naive. I was that young kid that didn't know what he was doing, knew I was going to war, but didn't know what fighting a war really was about. Experiencing those first-time fears, not knowing if I was going to make it home, being afraid to go into a house knowing that it can be full of enemy and they're all heavily armed, to even getting blown up by roadside bombs. So those first experiences will always stick with you, but at the same time, I wasn't mature either. Yeah. I had that sense to where I had the freedom to go and just lay hate and waste to anything and whatever decided to shoot at us. And that becomes, you're on a lower level of professionalism when you do that. Oh, wow. And you start to learn about, things start opening up for you. The more experiences you have, the more you get exposed to what the reality of war really is, on top of what your job is, though, too. So it differs. Every experience is obviously scary. Yeah. All your first-time experiences, you're always going to remember. But then there comes a shift to where once you start to get it and you realize it and you understand that you're doing a job and you know what your job is, I wouldn't say that it isn't any less scarier. It's just you have a better understanding of what you're doing to where some of the things you do aren't going to affect you like it did the first time. Because anytime anybody's experiencing anything for the first time, that's going to impact them the most. Yeah,
it's just shell-shocking. Yeah. That's the best term to put it as. I think you talked a lot about the mind and how you perceive war. When you first deployed versus the second time you were deployed, what was the mentality of how it changed from the first time to the second time as far as your purpose going into war?
So the first time, obviously, there's excitement. One of the things, I joined for a reason. Yeah. I knew what I was getting into, and I try to explain it to people is you make the decision to join. You know what job you're going to do. You go to training to do that job. It would be like being a professional basketball player and sitting on the bench the whole season.
Oh, wow.
You don't want to sit on the bench the whole season. You want to get into the game.
That's very good.
Once you get to that training, you want to get into the fight. So the first time there's excitement.
Yeah.
And the unknown. You don't know what's going to happen because you've never experienced that before. So I would compare the first time to being exciting to where my second time, during that time, obviously, since I gained rank, I have more responsibility as well. So I have to take not only in consideration myself, I got to take in consideration the guys that I'm leading at the same time. So you start to develop that professionalism and that leadership skills at the same time. So the difference would be from excitement to understanding your role and your position and growing responsibility.
Yeah. So you went from a place of being a soldier to like, let's get after this.
Yeah,
I
being
worry
a
about
leader.
myself to now you're becoming a leader and now
Yeah.
you have to worry about other people because not only is your priority to go out and win these battles and secure whatever you need to secure, but also you need to make sure that these people come home to their families at the same time.
Yes.
At times, making decisions as a leader, was there ever like an emotional, spiritual struggle to make decisions at times, especially when there's definitely a high risk of maybe losing anybody?
100%. You know, one of the things that I tell guys, obviously with being a man of faith, I knew who God was when I was over there. But I tell people there's a difference between knowing God and a difference between having a relationship with God. And for me, one of the struggles I had was I knew who God was. Missions where we get intel and it looks like it's basically a one way in and no way out, where we're probably not going to make it out. We would pray, but at the same time, I was just praying to get us through those missions. I wasn't having a relationship with God. But I tell people one of the issues I was dealing with was I didn't feel like I could work on a relationship with God because of the things I was doing at the same time.
Wow. And by defining the things that you're doing, was it specifically just being in warfare, or was it deeper than that for you?
Well, it was more about the acts and the actions that we had to do. And it wasn't that it really affected me. It was just I couldn't go and do what I had to do and then go and try to better myself with my relationship with God, knowing that for me at the time, knowing that I got to get up in the morning and do the same thing the next day that I just got done doing today.
Yeah.
So how could I continue to tell God and ask God what I'm doing while I'm doing these things over there? I just, for me, it was more about what is it?
Karma? Or
trying to think of the word right now. For some reason, I can't think of it. But blocking it out really is what it is. Being able to block out those thoughts and those feelings so that I could do my job at the same time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because not only that, there's a lot you have to block out too. Even with simple things with your family. You know, I have a wife and I have kids at home. Not having to think about them while I was over there doing what I was doing is something that I had to deal with, and something I had to learn at the same time.
Okay.
And that's pretty much, you know, those are the things that you learn to grow in at the same time as well.
Speaking of that, family. So when you were first deployed, where were you at as far as your relationship with your wife, and did you have kids at the time?
Yeah. So we started growing our family second deployment.
Second deployment.
Second deployment, yeah. So first deployment, I was pretty much out on my own. I was able to, you know, be that young guy and get all those first experiences in. And then once I came home after my first deployment, that's when I started getting a relationship with my wife.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so the second time around, obviously you have a family.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different. Like first time you're out on your own, you're making decisions on your own. This time it's like, you know, got to say goodbye to my wife, my kids, and go on and so forth. How was that as far as for your wife for the second deployment, as far as anything you can speak on her behalf, you know, especially leaving, you know, seeing a husband going out to war?
It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's hard, and you don't know. You get an idea of what it's going to be like, but once you actually live that out, it can be very challenging. It's challenging because you're worrying about everything back here at home and hoping that everything back here at home goes smooth, while you still got guys, in other countries trying to kill you.
Yeah.
So you got to try to block that out at the same time, but we're all human. And obviously we're with the people that we love and that we care about. And we're protectors as men of God, but also as men of the household.
Yeah.
Our duty is to protect and provide for our family. And when you get taken away from that, it can be challenging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I got you 100%. So obviously in warfare, you don't mind me asking, obviously,
Yeah.
have you had to take anybody's life while you're out at war?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, with my job,
Yeah.
being in combat arms and fighting in places of war for over 8 years.
Yeah.
And with that being my job.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're frontline, so you're heavily involved in that. I think one of the things that I want to ask in specific, because obviously it's a place where it's warfare, so, you have to do what you have to do for the sake and protection of the country and for who you represent. PTSD
Yeah.
is a heavy thing that's always been on my heart for a lot of our soldiers, especially when they come back home. I think it's gotten better as far as how we bring our soldiers back and make sure that we take care of them and get the right resources and so on and so forth. I think it's getting a little bit better. Obviously, there's a lot of work that needs to be at hand. But I don't see the same old, we have ex-military people on the streets homeless and they're not being taken care of.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that as much before, but post-traumatic stress disorder is what we're talking about. Is that something that you had to deal with coming back home at all? Or is it something that you know about in anybody else on your platoon with your
Right.
with your comrades that they've had to deal with personally?
Yeah. No, I mean, 100%, yes. I'm not going to deny having PTSD. Anybody who experiences stuff that's not of a normal life, that is severe trauma and severe situations, you're going to have it, but it depends on how you understand it at the same time. And a lot of people, the majority of the time, already have pre-existing conditions before they get exposed to those experiences. And then once they go through those experiences, it just magnifies what's already been a pre-existing condition.
Yeah.
But one of the issues we have is a lot of people don't want to accept that. They don't want to accept that they have been changed through their experiences.
Yeah.
And when they try to be in denial through that and not accepting that they do have PTSD, they try to mask that. And that's where substance abuse comes in.
Yeah.
And that's where they start going down that hole where they start having a lot of issues with PTSD, is because they want to be in denial. And for me, I was blessed. I mean, got healed with PTSD. I mean, not to say it's 100% gone, but I was a guy that was waking up in the middle of the night, punching my wife in the stomach because of the nightmares I was having. Or I was a guy that was walking back into my house 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning because I was posted up in a field somewhere in the middle of the night and had absolutely no clue what I was doing.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And for you, as far as those experiences, how long was that going on for you in your life?
Well, I would say for me, so I got medevaced out of Afghanistan right at the end of 2016, pretty much the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And I would say it took me, if I can put a timeline on it, I would say at least 2 years to get over and process and transition from doing what I was doing over there and then coming home. Because I try to explain it to people at the same time. I got into it for so long where a lot of people, they can go maybe 1 or 2 years in deployments. And I was there for over 8 years combined between Iraq and Afghanistan. That was my life. That became my life. Being here at home was my surreal life.
Yeah.
Coming home for a short amount of time, this wasn't what my life was. What my life was being in combat and being in those areas out there fighting and doing what we were doing. So it definitely took a toll on me. And, I would say if I put a time, about 2 years probably it took, where I had to process everything. I began, when I first came home, trying to mask it with the nightmares. Like I said, I'd wake up in the middle of the night doing things and be embarrassed about it. But then I didn't want to do that, so I would try to drink myself to sleep to where I would pass out. And then that just creates more problems than it does fixing it. It just masks the problem. It doesn't really get down to the root of it to fix what's going on.
Thank you for sharing that. I mean, obviously that's very courageous of you, and I know it's probably a tough subject at times to really talk about. I think you really hit a point that when you live a certain lifestyle and you don't know anything else right after you got out of it, it's easy just to kind of go back to that.
Yeah.
But in anything in life, but when it comes to war, it's just a completely different beast, because you go from protecting your country to now you have to live a civilian lifestyle.
Yeah.
And when you know something for so long, this is what you want to do. So if you're up at 3 a.m. in a field, why? Because you were doing that for 8 years. And so, no, I feel for you. I understand that, and you had to go through a bit of a process. And in the end of the day, you had to go through it. And I like what you said, that we shouldn't deny that we have changed.
Yeah.
That any life circumstances that we deal with, any situations that we go through, we can't act like it didn't change us. You know, I think especially for the younger generation, and including people myself, is that sometimes we pretend like real life circumstances don't change us, that we just need to cope with it. I'm like, no, it changes you, especially something like war, being part of war, serving in the military, it changes you. And we shouldn't run away from that. We should say, this is me, and then how am I going to get through this? Yeah. And I salute you for that. I salute you for that.
Yeah.
So, faith.
Yes.
So you said that you weren't really big into faith early on. You grew up in a Christian household.
Correct. Yep.
And it wasn't a big factor. When did things change for you in regards to your relationship with God?
Well, for me, like I said, things were changing for me, and I didn't know they were changing for me. God started to reveal to me the things and the steps that were changing me without me even knowing it. One of the things in that 2-year process after I came home from Afghanistan, I have one story about it that I can tell you on how he started to reveal those things for me. But things started to happen to me in my second deployment. Like I said, how I changed from excitement to responsibility. God already started revealing to me things when I was in my second deployment, to where it was, he literally told me, he's like, hey man, this is not what it's all about. Wow. And I really didn't understand what that meant. But I was also unknowingly listening to him and making decisions that I didn't realize what I was doing at the time, but I also didn't realize what kind of impact it was going to have at the same time too. Oh, wow. But things started happening. An incident happened where we were getting passed on a road by another unit. Mm-hmm. And there was a gentleman, an Iraqi father, who was standing outside his car, and he was trying to flag us down. And we just practically got ran off the road by another U.S. military unit, and we're like, hey, like, what are you guys doing? And they were trying to get out of there as fast as they could. So this gentleman tried flagging us down, and we stopped, because some majority of the time we'll stop if people are flagging us down, because we don't know if they're telling us, hey, there's an IED down the road, or there's you guys are going to get ready to roll into an ambush. So a good amount of time we would stop, hey, what are you doing? And he was yelling at us, and he was like, you guys killed my son. He was a sheikh of a town, so he's like, if you guys go to my town, I'm already going to tell our whole town to just start attacking you guys. And I'm like, whoa, hey, calm down, dude. You're talking a little reckless. Like, we're at war, and if you're telling me you're going to kill me, we're going to have to do something about it. Wow. And things got a little tense and heated up because he's yelling at us, because he's continuously telling us that his son was just shot. And I didn't believe it. But it got heated up. I ended up walking away because I was going to do something. that I probably would have regretted. And I started walking towards his truck. And first thing I was thinking is he was just looking for a handout. Like he just wanted some money, because one of the things we do if we wreck cars or anything like that, we pay him off.
Yeah.
So I was like, he's just looking for an easy paycheck. I go to his truck and I start looking in it. And I'm like, well, there's no kid here, you know? And I'm like, well, if this dad had his son shot, why is he stuck on the side of the road? Why is he not with his boy? So things weren't adding up to me. And the more I started looking in his truck, I started seeing things on the dashboard that pretty much, I mean, not to get too gruesome about it, but parts of his brain were on the dashboard.
Oh.
And the minute I saw that, it just changed me to where now we have this dad that I already threatened to end his life because he was threatening to end our lives. And what he was saying was true. And that's when God was telling me, hey, there's a lot more to this than what you guys are doing. And it was one of those things where the unit that passed us, unfortunately, you have those people where they think they can just shoot people and get away with it in a time of war. I mean, you're going to have bad people, but you have good people. And in that moment, I started making decisions that I knew it wasn't about what I can do while I'm over there with the freedom to be able to lay hate and waste like I was in my first deployment, to where I need to start making decisions that are actually going to impact the people of this country and change them. And the moment I started to realize that, that's when God put John 15:13 on my heart. And that's no greater love than this, than a man who will lay his life down for his friend. And once that hit me, and it hit me like a ton of bricks, I started to look for the opportunities to put my life in front of my brother's.
Wow.
And I tell people it's a selfless act, but it's also, in a way, a selfish act.
Yeah.
And I tell them it's selfless because, I mean, there's no greater love than that, and looking for that opportunity. Mm-hmm. But it was selfish because I was the one making that decision for myself and not taking into consideration my family and friends back home.
Yeah.
Because if I tell my wife or my friends or anybody, hey, I'm out here just looking for their opportunity to put my life in front of my friends, they're going to be like, what, are you crazy? And we need you to come back home.
Yeah.
But the more opportunities I looked for that, the more I got exposed to those experiences at the same time.
Wow.
And I had one experience where I did that, and I was in charge of a patrol. We just finished it was about a 9-10 hour patrol out in our town. And sure enough, like it always happens, we're right down the street from where we stay, and we hit an IED. Mm-hmm. And it was a catastrophic kill to my buddy's Humvee, and took my Humvee. We took some shrapnel, but then my other one was driving off. And at first I thought we were getting hit by mortars, and I didn't realize that we hit an IED. So I was on the radio yelling at everybody to push off the X, and the X is the attack zone.
Yeah.
You want to get off of the X as fast as possible. And I'm yelling at everybody, hey, get off the X, push out, let's drive through. And then I hear chaos on the radio, and I hear nothing but screaming. And then I realized that they're not mortars. We hit an IED. And so my buddy and the Humvee behind us, they got hit, they got stuck, and they can't go anywhere. And they're just screaming, panicking on the radio. And now we have to turn around to pick these guys up. And I'm on the radio, and I'm telling everybody, hey, watch out for secondary IEDs. Because whenever there's one, there's going to be another one.
Yeah.
And usually their MO is they're going to hit you, and they're going to wait for you guys to get out so that you can help them. And then once everybody's out, then they're going to hit you again. So the minute I said over the radio, watch out for secondaries, basically everybody froze. Oh, and wow. Nobody wanted to do their job. And at that time, once we got hit, now during all this, now we start getting hit with small arms fire, which are enemy combatants, and they all basically shooting at us with AK-47s.
Yeah.
And so now we're taking on small arms fire at the same time. And my buddy's still on the radio screaming, and he's telling me one of our guys, I'm not going to say his name, but he's like, he's out. And so we don't know what we're getting into. And we finally pull back up, turn around, and get to the vehicle. The vehicle's just, it's gone. So like the whole front's gone. I can't really see everything inside. And my buddy's on the gun, and he's just still kind of in a chaotic panic. Everything's happening real fast. And so none of my dismounts, since I was the truck commander, none of my dismounts are getting out. They kind of froze, and they didn't want to get out there because, I mean, it's scary stuff. Nobody wants to get shot or nobody wants to get blown up.
Yeah.
So I decided to get out because I wasn't going to leave my buddies that got hit high and dry. And sure enough, I go out, and my buddy is lunged over the radio, just not moving, not doing anything. And I immediately pull him out and pull him to the ground. And at that time, now some of our dismounts are getting out and basically helping everybody else. And I do a quick little check on him, just make sure there's no severe bleeding. But I don't know if he's alive. I don't know what's happening. So since that vehicle got hit, everybody in that vehicle and the rest of dismounts filled up my Humvee and the other Humvee to where my buddy I pulled out, there's no room for him, and there's no room for me.
Oh, man.
So, mind you, while all this is going on, we're still getting shot at. So the only thing I can think of is I'm going to throw him on the hood of my Humvee, and we're just going to jam out of there as fast as we could. So I pick him up, and I throw him on the hood of the Humvee. And then I go back to the Humvee and I start sterilizing it, throwing incendiary grenades to burn the Humvee just in case the enemy come and they start getting all our radios or intel or anything like that. So I'm going back to the Humvee to prepare it and sterilize it and basically burn it down so that we're leaving them nothing.
Yeah.
And at that moment that I go back to the Humvee, I look back at the hood and there was a sniper that was trying to shoot my buddy that I just put on the Humvee.
Oh, my gosh.
And I started freaking out, and I started getting angry. And come to find out, these guys were videotaping the whole attack because that's how they get paid.
Oh, my gosh.
So I see a couple rounds hit the hood of the Humvee right by his head, and that just angered me. And I still, at this moment, didn't know if he was alive or if he was dead. But the fact that they were still trying to shoot him bothered me. And I ran back over there and I laid on top of him and just started beating the windshield on my buddy. And he's just white knuckled, just freaking out, just wide-eyed. And I'm like, telling him, dude, we got to go. And instead of just not knowing if he was alive or if he was dead, like if he was dead, go ahead and shoot him. But I didn't think about that. And I just covered him and started pounding on the window. And luckily, we ended up getting out of there. And those are one of the experiences that I had where John 15:13, God's like, hey, man, there's a lot more to it than this.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things and one of the experiences that started to change how I started to see where I was at and to really take advantage of who I was and what I was doing in this country at the same time.
Wow.
And it wasn't even about just fighting a war. So then fast forward to me getting medevaced out of Afghanistan and how I got healed spiritually that way and how God started revealing to me all the things that I was doing and the decisions and the choices that I was making were decisions that I unknowingly knew were decisions that God had already laid out for me.
Yeah.
And one of the issues I had coming back was you miss that stuff.
Yeah.
Because there's no other feeling than being put in a situation where you don't know if you're going to make it out alive or not. But also having that feeling with your brothers that you love that are going to reciprocate that.
Yeah.
And are willing to do the same thing that you're willing to do.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to walk away from. Mm-hmm. And so for years, I struggled with that because I just felt nobody could understand that. Nobody was going to understand that. And how do I begin to explain that to somebody that's never going to really fully understand what it is I'm trying to express or what experiences I had?
Yeah.
So part of my issues was dealing with that. And so fast forward 2017.
Yeah.
I'm at home and I'm feeling sorry for myself. Like, thinking about all the stuff I've done. I went on this worldwide level, worked for other 3-letter agencies, doing stuff all over. Spent 6 years in Afghanistan. Put my hands on some of the most dangerous, highest level terrorists this world has to offer. And now I'm at home and I'm doing nothing. And I don't know how I'm going to be health-wise because I got medevaced. And I was pretty jacked up. So I was feeling sorry for myself.
What does medevac mean, if you don't mind?
Medically evacuated out of the country. So I was injured in Afghanistan and got sent home due to my injuries.
I got you. And how serious were the injuries at the time?
Serious enough to where I was combat ineffective. And I've been hurt a lot in combat to pretty serious extremes. I mean, stuff that should have taken me out years ago. And I have fought to stay over there, to stay with my brothers and fight with them. I mean, simple stuff like I've broken my ankle, almost severed my Achilles, cracked my head open. I've had multiple surgeries. So I've sustained a lot of injuries. But through those injuries, I was able to stay in the fight at the same time. So on this injury, there was nothing I could do. I couldn't even walk.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So I'm getting sent home.
Yeah.
You know. So I'm back home and I'm trying to process all of this. And I'm thinking about all the things that I've done. I'm thinking about my health. I'm thinking about my age, where I was at that time. And I'm like, what am I doing with my life? Like, I felt like I went from such a high to where now I'm below the ground. You know. And I had a hard time dealing with that and struggling with it. And one day God told me, he's like, I need you to do something for me. And it was kind of one of the silliest things. He told me to get on social media, on Facebook Messenger, and he's like, I need you to reply to this person. And I know it's God because for years when I was in Afghanistan, there was somebody who was trying to get a hold of me on Facebook.
Oh, wow.
And for about 4 or 5 years, I ignored it. And so this is even 4 or 5 years past the last time they tried to connect with me. So I completely forgot about it. And if you know social media, I wasn't friends with this person. So if they're requesting messages, they're hidden.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're going to see it on your normal list.
I never check those things.
No. And in the beginning, I ignored it because I was in Afghanistan. And as funny as it is, it's like, oh, not today, ISIS, like, because you think they're trying to get a hold of you. So it's like you ignore all this stuff.
Yeah, you don't want to take any chances.
Yeah. And this person for 1 year be like, 2013, hey, Sergeant Fortik, how are you? Ignore that. 2014, answer me, Sergeant Fortik. I'm like, oh, whatever, I'm not going to answer this. So then fast forward to 2017, and God's like, you need to go on social media and you need to reply to this message right here.
Wow.
And I was like, no, this is ridiculous. Like, I'm not going to do that. First of all, even if I tried to find this message, I'm not going to find it because it was so many years ago and it wasn't even and I wasn't an active friend. So how am I going to begin to find it? And he told me again, he's like, you need to respond to this message. And again, I said no. So then the third time, he's like, no, you need to do this right now. And I remember I was upstairs in my room. And I was like, all right, God, whatever. Thumbed through it, found the message. I don't know how I found it, but I ended up finding it.
Yeah. And
I was so disgruntled, I just put hi. That was it. Not like a, hey, who is this or anything. I just put hi.
Hi. You know? That's like, our generation, that's like,
right.
Why you texting me?
Yeah,
why you messaging me? Yeah.
No, and but that shows part of where I was at though too, with my frustration and the processing I was in and what I was dealing with. And it was like, all right, God, there you go. Hi, you happy now? And the minute I send hi, the whole world just opened up to me. And this person responds to me within 10 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And so now I'll rewind back to my second deployment in Iraq, where I told you God started speaking to me there, and I was making decisions that I didn't realize I was doing.
Yeah.
And so now this was in second deployment, so 2006, 2007, 2008. We're looking at almost 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That this person was trying to get a hold of me too, but 10 years ago from when I knew this person.
Wow.
And it happened to be a family in Iraq that I took care of.
Oh, wow.
And this family that I took care of, we used to patrol around Iraq and stop and talk to the locals, hey, we're the bad guys, point us to them. What are you doing? What can we do to help you type of thing? And we came across this house, and it's not a house. It's basically like dirt and dirt floor, And we walked in this house, and it was a mother and a father, 3 brothers, and four daughters. And one of the daughters was 2 of them were really, really sick on the floor. One of them was basically getting ready to pass away. Just really malnutrition, just really sick. And they are just sitting up against the wall on the dirt, and all they're doing is just staring at her. So it was a real surreal kind of scene to where it's like we're walking into this house, and all these people are doing are just sitting here staring at their child, and they're just basically waiting for her to take her last breath. And we start talking to the father, like, what's going on? He's starting to explain to us all this stuff where he couldn't work. The wife obviously couldn't work because she was a woman.
Yeah.
And all the other kids were too young at the time. So he had no money to take her to the doctor. They had no money for food. They had no money for anything. So they were just living, trying to survive. And me and my buddy, we walked out of that house and looked at each other like, there's something we got to do about this.
Yeah.
And we made the decision right then and there in the beginning that we were going to help this family.
Oh, wow.
So the next day we go and we bring our medic. And of course we asked the father, hey, we brought our medic. Is it okay if he looks at her and checks her out? And he's like, yeah, no problem. So we set her up with an IV, give her medication. But we also brought a lot of food too, food and water.
Wow.
So for this whole deployment, our sole purpose was to serve this family. Mm-hmm. And since I was the Alpha entry team leader and we would go hit houses, one of the things I would do is I went from taking all the propaganda, all the weapons, and all the intelligence that we can take to where I no longer started doing that because I knew my team was doing that to where now I was looking for the food, I was looking for the propane, I was looking for the water, and I was filling my truck up with everything that was in that house because the bad guys don't need it anymore because either A, they're gone, or they're getting zip tied and they're not going to be in that house no longer. And every time I go on hits, I would take all the supplies and then I would take it to the house the next day.
Wow.
So we did this for a whole year. And one of the things we started doing is building relationship and talking to one of the older daughters who spoke English. Okay. And so that made the relationship even closer. So we no longer used our terp.
Yeah.
And we used the daughter to communicate. So we end up doing this for a whole year. And then we end up leaving. It was a really emotional thing. We took pictures and tried to do a photo album. And I mean, it's just pictures on paper. So it's not like professional photos or anything. It was just what we could make do with and kind of like a going away gift. Like, hey, we were a family. You guys took care of us and we took care of her. The daughter ended up getting her health back, was no longer in a danger as far as losing her life.
Wow.
And then we left that, and I forgot about that. And so then 2017, God's like, hey, go respond to this message. And it happened to be the daughter of the family.
That's beautiful.
And she immediately starts saying, Sergeant Fortik, this is so-and-so and so. You remember us from Iraq. You helped my family. It was such a beautiful time. And just starts telling me everything. Then she sends me the pictures that we took with the family that they still have to this day, a piece of paper. Think about that. If I gave anybody here a piece of paper with a picture, it's going to be gone in like a week.
Yeah.
They still have that to this day in that house. And the minute I saw that picture, I started crying. I just broke down. And God was like, this is what you were doing. This is what matters.
Yeah.
This is why you did what you did.
Yeah.
This is why the decisions you made, and you walked through that. Now here's the fruits to your labor.
Wow.
The answer's right here. And it broke me.
Yeah.
I mean, it hit me hard. I went to the ground, and I was like, who am I?
Yeah.
How can I be so immature and so selfish to feel sorry about myself when this family right here it was doing what they were doing and we helped them?
Yeah.
To where I started getting excited and I started apologizing. I was like, I'm so sorry that I ignored you after all these years. But then I tried to explain, I'm still in Afghanistan. I thought you were ISIS, and
Yeah.
and she completely understood. So then I was like, so what are you doing? She tells me that her family is thriving. Not only are they thriving, she has a job now as a female, and she's a nurse at the Baghdad hospital.
Wow.
To where she's taking care of her whole family.
That's great.
All because of the things that we did when we were there and helping them out. And she just wanted to keep in contact and just say thank you for that moment. And I completely forgot about it until she reached out to me.
Yeah.
And then God told me, hey, man,
Yeah.
you need to respond to this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what helped me with where I was at after coming back home and feeling like what I was doing wasn't good enough. And then that's when I started really pressing in and working on my relationship with God. I was like, you know what? All right, God, I got you. I knew of you, but I didn't know who you were.
Yeah.
And now I want to know who you are. But I want to do more of this because it broke me. And I want to do better and have more of a bigger impact than even though I'm not to take anything away from that family, but it just left me with wanting more.
Wow.
And in that moment, that's when I started getting healed with PTSD and everything.
Wow.
On top of that. Yeah.
I think in the midst of chaos, you don't realize the good that's coming out of it. And
100%.
war can be chaotic.
Yes.
It's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen. You go in with the concept of we're going to war here, but you don't know the blueprint that's being laid out when you're going out on the battlefield because everything is so unpredictable because you don't have the blueprint on the other side. You don't know what's happening. But in the midst of all that, in the midst of serving your country, you were able to serve a community that also needed the help during that time, that were not necessarily involved in this.
Yeah.
And to have the opportunity to remember that, yeah, things happen, but at the same time, some good came out of it, despite whatever was going on the battlefield, that there were civilians out there that needed people like you to go out and take care of them. And that's a beautiful story that we should always be reminded that no matter what we're going through, the chaotic things in life, that there's nothing more beautiful than to go out and uplift others in their time of need.
Yeah.
That sometimes we have to lay down the sword so that we can go out and give bread.
Yeah.
To go out and give fresh water. Like we deal with spiritual warfare, we deal with physical warfare, we deal with emotional warfare. But in the midst of all of that, there's just times where we just got to put that aside and go out and do something for the greater good.
Yeah.
And, the healing portion of it, for me, just kind of outside looking in, it was you were healed because you understood your purpose.
Right.
And that's what I really got from that. And I think a lot of times, especially when you go and you do something for so long, you lose purpose of what it actually you're doing. Why? Because there's a bigger story or a deeper story that hasn't been revealed yet.
Right.
And for you to have the opportunity to hear this family while serving in the military, you were serving them and you were helping them. And now look at where they're at today.
Yeah. It's that's God.
Yeah.
It's powerful. It's amazing. And it's one of those things, even in those moments when you're dealing with difficulties and you don't know what's going to happen or you don't even know what's going on while it's happening, God knows.
Yeah.
And his understanding is far greater than our understanding.
Yeah.
And that's the power of God is that revelation of, all right, God.
Yeah.
Wow. Look at me.
Yeah.
It's almost embarrassing to be in front of him and be like, look at how I've been whining and thinking sorry of myself. Well, this whole time you've already made the way and now you're revealing it to me.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful, powerful experience.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, it's obviously a very deep, heavy story. Obviously, you know, our audience is going to watch this. Last question, you know, military obviously is a big importance in our country. Obviously, we love people that want to serve our country and do it with the right heart, right mindset, and in regards to protecting the rights and the free will that we've been given here through the Constitution. And we have a beautiful nation. We're almost like the beta of of everything because we're the first ones to ever do something like this.
Right.
But protecting it is very important. And obviously, I'm in full support of anybody that ever wants to go and serve the country. And my dad gave me the choice of college or military, and I was on the fence with it, you know, because I've always wanted to be in that place of servanthood in some way, somehow.
Right.
And I believe everybody should take that into consideration when they do that. But for anybody out there, especially our younger audience that is even in consideration of possibly serving in the military, what would be your advice to them entering into a type of service like that?
I would tell them, first off, that it's your decision, first of all, that you're making. A lot of people that have issues or problems with this country, the majority of them are people that have never fought for this country. 1% of the U.S. population decides to make that decision to serve our country.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, but we're one nation under God.
Yeah.
And for anybody out there that thinks or is making the decision to serve, that's your decision. Don't let anybody else take that decision away from you. Not only that, but the decision you're making is a greater decision beyond what anybody could understand because you are that 1%.
Yeah.
And you're making a decision that a lot of people would not do, but would sit back and have their own judgment and their own ideas and their own opinions about what we should do with this country.
Yeah.
So the only advice I could say is that's your decision. Don't get influenced by anybody else. If you have a passion or you feel like that's what you need to do, walk through that, walk that out. And don't let anybody take that away from you because what you're doing is you're deciding to serve. Mm-hmm. And you're deciding to serve our country. And as people of God, we serve people. Mm-hmm. So you put those two together and have a greater understanding of what decision you made. That's going to help you excel in the military.
Yeah. That's great advice. Yeah. I mean, making the right decision for the right reasons nowadays is one of the most important things I think our young people really need to understand.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining. This was an awesome episode. Obviously, I wanted to give you the floor to share whatever you felt like was in your heart.
I appreciate it.
And this is a podcast of the everyday person, guys. And we have the opportunity to bring on a military veteran that served in our country and was deployed for over 8 years in 2 different places. And the reason why I wanted to bring Jason on, one, I think he's an amazing person. And we want to give him the platform to be able to share his experience and have the opportunity to share how even through warfare, he was still able to grow in his relationship with God and ultimately to really overcome the things that he went through in life. He needed God first. So any military vets that are out there that may be watching this, that may be dealing or struggling or in any way, feel free to hit us up.
Yeah.
And we want to get connected with you. I am in full support of having a strong military, but I'm full support of supporting our military in every which way, not just on the battlefield, but outside of the battlefield as well. But number 2, the everyday person could be someone like Jason, who has gone through things, seen things that most people never get to see. And it's important to be able to hear everybody out in every story, in every circumstances, no matter what it sounds like. And obviously, your story is unique. Why? Because you are the 1%. But that's the beautiful thing. The 1% should be heard as well. And we want to take the time to honor our military. We should be thankful. Don't make it be a Veterans Day thing, a 9/11 thing where we're supporting our military. No, make this be an everyday thing. Why? Because they're putting their lives on the line every single day to protect our country, to protect the identity of one nation under God. And so make sure that we spend that time as an audience to thank somebody who served in our country and show honor in that. Why? Because what they're protecting is much deeper than a constitution, a piece of paper. No, they're protecting one nation under God, an identity, something that stands for something bigger than what we represent in 50 states. So I just want to remind you of that. So as we conclude, make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. If you enjoyed this content, make sure you share it to someone that may need this, anybody out there. And then more importantly, continue to support the movement here as we continue to move forward and bring you everyday fresh content of the everyday person as we sit here, talk about life, and talk about God. Well, thank you for joining us, man.
Oh,
this was awesome. We may have to bring you back on here because
I'd love to do
I want to
that.
get your perspective on many things. We have a big October coming up, just to kind of give you a little bit of a drop. Obviously, election is coming up, so we're going to be talking about a lot of the political issues and tie it back to Christianity and where should we stand on Christian faith. We're not going to talk about who we're voted for and all that stuff. No, we want to get back to the simplicity of reason through the understanding of the gospel in regards to the issues, the top issues in regards to the politics today. But without further ado, we're going to get out of here.
All right.
You enjoyed this?
Oh, I loved it. I had a good time.
Oh, man, this was great. Well, we love you. God bless you. And I hope that this was an experience for you. Peace.